All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Careers in STEM series. We are FRC Team 226 from Troy, Michigan, and we consist of over 100 high school students from Troy and Athens High School competing in the first robotics competition since 1999. This is a bi-weekly show occurring on the first and third Thursdays of every month. For this series, we'll have a 30-minute interview period and then a 15-minute Q&A period for audience questions at the end. My name is Shaun Dantas, and I'm a junior at Athens High School.
My name is Sonnet, and I am currently a sophomore at Troy High School.
Today we have Alec Minchington with us. Alec grew up in Sterling Heights and graduated from Athens in 2018. He is currently a junior at the University of Michigan, majoring in computer science with a focus on web systems and programming languages. Last summer, he interned at Amazon, and he's hoping to return there full-time after graduating. So before we start with the interview, please remember to put all your questions in the chat so that we can answer them either during the interview or at the end. So, Alec, let's start with high school. What sort of activities did you do at Athens?
Yeah, sure. Well, the main types of activities, extracurricular speaking, that I did in high school, I mean, mainly robotics. Robotics is the big one, right? There were a couple other things that I did, like on the side. Like I was in NHS. I was in a couple miscellaneous clubs. Like I think I was in chemistry club for a year or two, which is strange because I really just don't like chemistry. But I think robotics was really the main thing. It was like one of the main and only things that I did during high school in terms of activities.
Could you tell us a little bit more about your time on 226 and what you did there?
Yeah. So it's really hard to describe. I spent a lot of time thinking about how I was gonna, talk about my time on 226. It's really hard to describe quickly because it was such a huge portion, of my high school, my time in high school. I joined the team my freshman year, stayed on until I was a senior and graduated. But I think for me, it was really like a major, life-changing experience for me. It was being on this team. I made lifelong friends, people that I'm still friends with to this day. I think more importantly, though, it did teach me a lot of lessons, being on the team and being able to compete and all that. Things, and these are just kind of some that I had thought of, but, things like a lot of the time when I was on 226, we were still kind of an up and coming team, was striving for improvement. And, a consequence of that was that we lost a lot, and so a big thing for me was like it made me realize that it's okay, to lose. It's definitely okay to lose because it's more of a learning experience, right? You figure out what went wrong, you fix it. That's what like robotics is all about. You figure out what's wrong and then you fix the issue. I think maybe another major thing that 226, being on 226 taught me and going to these competitions was that there are always people that are going to be smarter than you. And, getting used to that is a huge part of life, right? Because in high school, I'll admit I had a bit of a, superiority complex. Like I thought we were like, yeah, we're like, we're the best robotics team. We got the best programmers and stuff. And obviously that wasn't true. But like, being able to go and see these other teams who are just like top of the game, people like 254 Engine Nerds, people like that. It really puts things into perspective for how much you can, at the level you're at, how much you actually have room to improve. And so that was another like major thing that by senior year that had been kind of ground into my head. Yeah.
So, what was like your most memorable moment? What was the most impactful moment on 226, you'd say?
I think so. There are a bunch of, consequence of me being on the team for so long is that it was a super eventful time, those 4 years. So there are quite a few moments that stick out, but I think probably the single most memorable moment was how I still remember how I felt when I was on the drive team, and it was our team in playoffs at the Gaylord competition. I think it was in 2018. It was Power Up, so whatever year that was. Um, that was, I think, the farthest our team had ever gotten in terms of playoffs. When I like in my entire time on the team, we made it to, I think it was finals. We ended up making it to, so we didn't win, but we came just close. But the feeling of being on the field like at that time was, yeah, I will never forget it, because it was the most heart pounding, stressful, suspenseful, like hope, like hopeful, like we can really do this, like we can really win, type thing. And it's yeah, I think that's probably the most memorable thing that I can remember.
You obviously had a lot of really cool experiences on the team, and seeing our team grow so much and improve so much over these past few years, what do you feel about our current progress?
So that's another thing that I thought about a lot is I'm so proud of where you guys are now as a team, and it makes me happy because it validates the years of work that I did when I was on the team with with my teammates, of course, to in an effort to improve the team, like always getting better year over year, making slightly better robots, having slightly better code, just perfecting our techniques for everything. And the fact that now you guys are, this huge team, routinely winning Shermans, just knocking it out of the park with your robotic competitions. It's really nothing, like I couldn't have asked for anything better. It's just to see us continue rising. It's awesome. I'm really proud.
I feel like a proud parent.
Yeah, exactly. It almost feels like that now at this point. Yeah.
So picking a major is like probably the most difficult decision you go through in high school, just because there's so many different options and degrees.
Mm-hmm.
So what was like your main decisive moment that made you pick computer science?
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, I guess it's my experience was kind of, I think, less of a challenge than a lot of people when it comes to picking a major. And that's mainly because since even before high school, I was like pretty sure that computer science was the thing for me. So I kind of had the easy way out, I guess, where I came into high school knowing that I enjoyed programming and knowing that I wanted to do computer science. And I just, when I joined 226, I hopped right on the programming team, and the rest is history. So for me, there wasn't like, I'd have to think way back, probably to middle school. Probably the moment would be something like I remember in middle school, I was basically messing around with like HTML, just trying to make like a basic website and stuff, because that's what they, were teaching. They had like a single computer class in middle school. And I remember thinking like, writing some code, opening it in Chrome and seeing it work and being like, wow, that's cool. I want to do more of that. And I think from there it just kind of, um, escalated into me just having like, just a love for programming in general, making things work, making cool things.
Computer science in general has been really growing in the past few years. A lot of students, more and more, they want to pursue it. And it's also getting a lot more competitive. But I feel like for a lot of students, they're not exactly sure what computer science entails. So, what do you
Mhm.
really do as a computer science student?
Yeah, completely right about it being a huge major now. I think it's the biggest major on campus, if I'm on my campus at least, if I'm not mistaken. Um, but yeah, just to describe, I guess, general overview of what computer science is. It's the study of using computers to do things. I guess at the lowest level, that's what it is. So as a computer scientist, you're going to learn how to program, right, and to write programs to do useful things. Um, that's really at its core all it is. But the cool thing about computer science is that it's such an I guess it spans so many different like concentrations that um, somebody who's completely different in terms of what they want to get out of college could also be a computer science major and have a completely different experience, um, but still a fulfilling one, right? There's everything from, I don't know, developing like web systems, something like being a web developer, all the way to doing research on, I don't know, like robotics or something, right? For example, Um, yeah, I guess the other thing that draws a lot of people in, and I'm pretty sure it's a contributing factor to why the major is so popular nowadays, is that the salaries tend to be on the higher side, right? So that's something to consider. Obviously, I would not recommend doing CS explicitly, just for the salary. Because yeah, if you're not doing something that you enjoy as a career field, I feel like you're in for a bad time there. Um, but that's I guess computer science in a nutshell is yeah.
So, uh, you said that you really find that there's a lot of stuff that goes into CS. What would be your most like what would be the most interesting to you? What part really sticks out to you when you go through your computer science program?
In terms of parts that stuck out to me, like talking about my education more so, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, I think the number one skill to have as a computer scientist would be sort of the ability to break down problems and think algorithmically about them. But because that really applies to like every, not even just computer science really, but a lot of problem areas. But in computer science, it's what you're going to be doing on a day-to-day basis. If you're at a company, you're going to be solving problems for them, hopefully in a efficient and graceful way. So certainly having that skill. Yeah, going to school for computer science has definitely nurtured that for me. So that's definitely like a very important element. In terms of like other standout moments, like generally in my education, um, figuring out what I kind of wanted to settle into in computer science was a pretty interesting experience, right? Because coming out of high school, I had basically only done like Java programming for robotics, which is really cool, right? That's awesome. That's why I stayed in robotics for so long because I enjoyed doing it. But being able to take classes in stuff like web systems, classes in I don't know, um, it's another good one. Programming languages. I'm listening to things that I am interested in, but there are a bunch of different classes. Like UI design is one, or software engineering is another one, right? Operating systems. There's a bunch of different classes that just kind of take you through the different areas of computer science. And so kind of taking a bunch of these different classes and figuring out, wow, I really like that. I didn't expect to like that part of computer science. Was super interesting and a lot of fun, I think.
Yeah.
So, besides taking really cool classes and learning educationally, being
Mhm.
in organizations and clubs is obviously also a huge part of your overall college experience.
Mhm.
So, at the University of Michigan, what organizations or clubs are you involved with?
Yeah, so when I joined or when I my freshman year of college, I was fresh off of 226, right? I was like, okay, how do I get the same experience that I got, or a similar experience that I got in robotics in college? Um, so I instantly gravitated towards some of the project teams they have there. So they have a number of engineering project teams at Michigan. The one that I ended up joining was called MAV. That's MAAV, and it stands for Michigan Autonomous Aerial Vehicles. So they're an organization that kind of participates in they participate in a robotics competition, but the competition is to make a drone that flies autonomously, basically. So all through software and all of that. That really drew me in because it seemed like a difficult challenge that mainly revolved around a lot of software, which is what I was interested in, was writing software for robots, right? And so for the first 2 years of college, I was on MAV and I participated in MAV, and I had a good time. But one thing that being on MAV, like I think probably the most valuable lesson that, or the most valuable thing that I gained from being on MAV in the first place was learning that I wanted to try things other than robotics in computer science. Um, because coming to college, I was super excited. All right, I want to do robotics as a career. I know it. I'm certain of it. And then a couple years down the road, I was like, well, maybe not. There's definitely other things that I'm actually having a lot of fun with, um, that seem worth trying out. And so after 2 years, after my sophomore year, I I quit MAV because I wanted to try other things. And so after that, I didn't end up joining any other organizations. Not because there weren't any that interested me, because there are still a bunch that I would probably have fun joining. But mainly because what I realized what I wanted to do and how I wanted to spend my time was working on just making cool stuff that I thought was interesting and that I thought could possibly benefit people. Right. So it's more so just me working alone on like personal projects and things of that nature. More so. That's kind of how I spend my time nowadays, instead of being on an organization. Um, yeah, that's
So
kind of my experience with orgs so far.
yeah, so you talked about building software and personal projects. You
Mhm.
won a contest this summer
I
over
did.
building an operating system. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So it was building a programming language, not an operating system actually, but it was yeah, I'll just talk about it briefly, I guess. It was a contest hosted by this company called Replit. They're kind of like an online code editor service. You can kind of just go to their website and start writing some code and run the code just really easily on your browser. It's super cool stuff. But basically, they hosted this competition, kind of like a hackathon, except for everybody was building a programming language instead of just anything. And so my friend and I decided that we wanted to, participate in it because we were both pretty interested in programming languages, and we thought we could make something pretty neat. And so we worked pretty much every day for like a decent amount of hours over like a 3-week span. So this was the last, I think, the last 2 weeks of summer, and then the first week of school had started was when this took place. Yeah, so we put a lot of work into it. And I mean, long and short of it is that we ended up winning. We found out like a month later that we had actually ended up winning after they had done all the judging. But it was a super fun experience because the partner that I worked with, he is one of the smartest people I've ever met in my entire life. And getting to work with him, kind of pick his brain about how he thinks about things, and also, myself trying to, think of interesting ways to solve these like unique design problems that come up when you're trying to design something as complex as a programming language and implement it, was like super, super beneficial. And so I definitely feel like I gained, a decent amount of knowledge, design experience from that as well. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
That seems like a really cool side project to do. But besides that, what other projects have you been doing?
Yeah, I mean, so basically the way that I kind of do my side project is I think of something that would be cool to do, and then I just do it. One example that I did at the start of last summer, so right around, I don't know, I guess May, June, it's this website called Lambster. You can actually go to it right now if you want to. It's lambster.dev. But it's basically, the reason that I worked on it was because it was this fusion of these two fields that I'm really interested in. It was this fusion of web systems and a programming language. And essentially what it is it's an online kind of interpreter for this very like specific esoteric language, um, that I wrote and then wrote a website for as well. So it's just a place where people can go and kind of play around with it and run code and stuff like that. Um, yeah, but it's I put a lot of work into it, and I think it turned out pretty nicely. Yeah, but that was like one example. So I just do stuff that I think would be cool to make and that interests me pretty much.
So I'm sure there's definitely a lot of viewers curious about internships and other sort of stuff
Right.
in college. So how did you manage to secure an internship with Amazon?
Yeah. I'm sure some of the people watching are looking for like, the secret sauce for getting an internship, but unfortunately I don't have that for you. My experience like getting an offer was pretty run of the mill. I applied to Amazon probably in November. I heard back from them in like early January, February about getting an interview. I interviewed with them, a few weeks after that. And then I waited a while and I got my offer. That was my process. It was very standard, what you'd expect. Um, yeah, in terms of the process. Yeah.
Was Amazon what you thought that it would be like? How was it? And was it exactly how you expected it to be?
It was interesting, right? Because it was when I started working, it was during quarantine, so I was just, in my parents' basement, just on a computer, just doing the work that I was doing. Which definitely was a drag because I would have much preferred living in Seattle. Um, but I was, just working in my basement on my laptop, and it was I'll say it was about as much as I could have expected from something being online like that. I still haven't had an actual internship in person yet, so I don't really have anything to compare it to in terms of like, which I like which of the experiences I like better, or yeah, basically. But my time working in Amazon, like actually doing the work, was like pretty much what I expected. I expected to be doing something within the realm of like web systems, things like that, and that's what I ended up doing. So using a lot of like the Amazon Web Services stuff and putting those pieces together, writing my own, web code and stuff to make it all um, come together. I don't think I can talk about it legally. I'm not sure, so I'm going to refrain from like the specifics, But it was definitely enjoyable. It was pretty much what I expected in terms of the day-to-day programming and stuff like that I was doing. My team was super nice. I had heard from some people that the culture at Amazon was kind of toxic at points, in terms of like the people value work over everything else, but I really did not have that experience at all. My team was wonderful. My boss, I remember this very vividly because it caught me off guard, but I was just working on my stuff, and I was having a problem, and I shot him a message, and it was at this point it was probably like 5:45 p.m. where I was, and he said, he answered the question, but immediately after he said something like, "Wait, it's like, isn't it after 5 p.m. where you are? You should stop working. You shouldn't be working right now." And I was like, "Wow, it's really cool that they're that aware of their employees' like work-life balance." I thought that was really cool. It's probably worth noting that this varies by team. I got placed with one team out of a million teams that are doing software engineering at Amazon, but I'm willing to bet that the majority of them are the same, have the same kind of viewpoints as my team did. But overall, very positive experience. I enjoyed it, and that's why I'm going back next summer. Yeah.
Are you going to be going back to Seattle, or
I'm leaning towards probably not, mainly because it's going to be on the fence whether the whole pandemic and everything is actually over at that point. It's looking more towards more positive at this point, but right now I'm planning to not. I'm planning probably just to stay here, in my apartment, and work from home again. Um, but we'll see. If I would really like to go to Seattle, but yeah, maybe not this summer, maybe next year. Yeah.
So from high school, all the way to right now, when you have an internship for Amazon next summer, you've obviously learned a lot and gone through a really long journey. So if you were to boil it all down, what is one piece of advice that you would give to students on how to be successful on robotics and beyond?
Yeah. Well, from a robotics standpoint, I don't know. This is probably obvious, but the number one thing that I think made me successful in robotics was just putting as much as you possibly can into it. Within reason, of course. You don't want to fail all your classes because you're only doing robotics. But if you are interested in robotics and you want to help, make a difference on the team, just put in the time. Just keep showing up. Keep learning more things. Keep getting better at what you're doing. And that is kind of how you can do good on the team. It's as simple as that. That's all I did. Is I said, wow, I really enjoy programming. And so I just kept coming. I kept learning more, about programming and how to do it well. And eventually I ended up as programming lead, and then teaching other people, how to do the same thing. So definitely, I think give it your all is the number one thing you can do. In terms of like preparing for college, easy answer is, obviously you want to be, taking the most challenging classes you can, like AP classes and stuff like that, which I'm sure most of you are anyways. Just in terms of a college preparedness, like if you can make yourself accustomed to the type of workload that you're going to have in college earlier, it's just better. And I can definitely say that some of the AP classes I took did that, and they did a decent job of that. So that's good. The other thing is, and this is challenging. It was easy for me because of how early I knew what my major was going to be and what I wanted to do. But if you're able to figure out or have a good idea of what you want to major in college, if you can get a head start on major related things, in high school, that's awesome. And it really helps me, thrive in college while I was doing my degree, right? Because for me, I came into college with a pretty big leg up on the average student, where I had been programming for years at this point, and I had a pretty decent base or foundation to start on that let me kind of it just made adjusting to college a lot easier, on the workload of college a lot easier. So if you're able to definitely get a head start on your major, no matter what it is, it definitely can help. So that's I think a big piece of advice, probably the single best piece of advice that I could give.
And considering how the team is mostly based at Troy High and stuff, how did it affect you being an Athens student to be on a team full? I'm an Athens student, and a lot of the stuff is at Troy High, so it's really it's a different experience compared to the Troy High kids. So how did that affect your time on the team?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm right there with you in terms of there were I don't know how the team actually. Question for you: how what percentage of the team now is Athens versus Troy High? Do you know offhand?
I'm not. I think it's maybe a 30 or a 35 65 or
okay,
or 25 around that much. It's a majority of Troy High.
Okay, yeah. Because when I was on the team, it was there were maybe 10 people from Athens max. So I was definitely in the vast minority. And I honestly didn't have much of it wasn't an issue being at Athens. It mainly just meant that when I was a senior, Troy High was basically my second high school. I would just my day would consist of do high school at Athens, and then when school ended, drive to Troy High, go to the wood shop, and just do robotics for another, I don't know, however many hours, right? I feel like I know Troy High's layout just as well as I know Athens, just from being there so long. It's definitely a second home, or I guess second school.
The Troy High layout is way easier than the Athens layout.
Yeah, and it even got to the point where I think the majority of my friends in high school were actually Troy High students, not Athens students, right? Just because I was over there consistently all the time. Yeah, but that was my experience with it. Basically a Troy High student with more driving.
All right, so thank you so much. We're now going to be moving on to other questions from the audience and extra stuff.
Yeah.
So, what was the Amazon campus like when you interviewed there in person for your internship?
So I didn't interview there in person, which was also a bummer, right? It was January, February, which was before COVID, obviously, but it was Amazon, I think, does all of their, well, I don't want to say all, but they did their intern interviews all virtually they hire a ton of interns. They have probably close to 1,000 interns every summer. So I think logistically from their perspective, it doesn't make sense to fly in 1,000 people. So I was just interviewed virtually. Yeah. And I mean, in terms of the interview, they asked me just a technical question, something to gauge my programming knowledge. So I had to write a solution for that. And then they kind of asked me about, more behavioral type stuff, my involvement as in organizations and clubs and stuff like that. Yeah, things of that nature. Oh yeah, okay. So Mr. 2 asks, what programming language would you recommend HS students learn? That is a good question. So not Java. I'm going to say not Java, even though it's what we use for everything on 226. I think probably the single most powerful, most like wide-ranging in terms of application language would be Python. I would say learning Python is not only is it a great first language to learn because the syntax is super easy to learn. It's almost like English. Like it's very, very close to like just reading English code at point or like reading English at points. But also Python is used in like literally every field you could ever think. It's used in machine learning and web systems and programming languages, right? It's just it's ubiquitous pretty much at this point. There's no reason that you shouldn't learn Python, like if you're doing a CS major. Yeah.
So for students interested in computer science, I want to major in computer science. What sort of project would you say that you should do in high school that would help you out in college?
Yeah, in terms of projects to do, I can't give advice on like, oh, you should do this specific thing. I would just say do something that I mean, basically do what I'm doing now, where like if you see something that looks interesting that you want to learn more about, just do a project in that, because the best way to gain in-depth knowledge about something is just to make it work, right? To do it yourself and make it work. And it doesn't even need to be anything crazy, right? Like, you know, you just writing a basic, like one of the first projects that I did, my freshman, sophomore year in college was just writing like a little portfolio website for myself that just kind of displayed like, I don't know, like a little blurb about myself and, like resume, stuff like that. But even just stuff like that, honestly, that is actually a good concrete project. As if you make, now that I'm thinking about it, if you make a personal website for yourself that you can slap that on your resume, right, for recruiters to go to, and they can just read about you. It shows that you're competent, as a computer scientist enough so to build a website, and it shows that you care about your career, you're putting in effort. So I think portfolio website is a great way to start, actually. Now that I'm thinking about it. Yeah, but if you don't feel like you don't want to do web stuff, like that's totally fine. Just find something that you think is interesting and do that.
Another question from the audience. What do you think distinguished you from other University of Michigan computer science applicants? Because it is getting pretty competitive.
Right. So that's a good question. I think for me, what the distinguishing factor was, I mean, when I applied to college, my like 90% of my application was robotic stuff. And so I think for me, the distinguishing factor was the degree of work that I put into robotics, because at that point it was basically like a job, right? That's just what I did outside of school was robotics. And so I was able to talk about, the experiences that I had in robotics, obviously, in terms of like, competing and gaining all this knowledge and solving problems. All of that stuff really helped, I think, to strengthen my application. Other than that, I don't have too much more insight because they, obviously they don't tell you why you got in. But I think just having a lot of strong experiences from being on a team, as well as a lot of like some experience in your major's field, and in terms of I had experience with programming, obviously shows that you are passionate about going to college or wanting to learn more, right? So that can also help, I would say.
Also, one of the last questions, what sort of tips do you have for working remotely or doing internships remotely?
Yeah, with working remotely, it can be a challenge. One thing that I think the single biggest problem for me was that working at home, I and this might just be a me thing, but when I'm at home, my work ethic is so much lower than when I'm, living in dorms, or right now when I'm living in my apartment, right? It can be really, really hard to stay motivated to actually do your work when you're just like in your basement at home. right? And this isn't advice that necessarily everybody can follow at this point, especially in high school. But one thing that I did last summer when I was working was in the middle of my internship, I was like, okay, my productivity is so low right now. Something needs to change. So I moved in with my friend at his apartment for like a month during the summer, right? A nice change of environment to kind of, switch things up a little bit, and it actually did help a lot. The change of environment definitely was way more productive than I would have been staying at home for the entire summer. Um, you know, just locked up in my house, like not being able to go anywhere or do anything for the whole summer. So that was super nice. That definitely helped me a lot. Um, Otherwise, in terms of working virtually, I think at this point, even after the pandemic, we're probably going to be seeing a lot of jobs staying virtual. I wouldn't be surprised if my job just stayed virtual, like even after I graduated, to be honest with you. Um, but I think it helps to invest in like good equipment, like a good webcam, like a nice to have a nice setup where you can actually do work productively, right? So, probably, hopefully, something more than like a laptop at a card table, right? Just something where you're actually comfortable and able to get work done efficiently would help. Also, second monitor. Okay, getting a second monitor is like top tier purchasing decision. So that's like way up there on the list. Yeah, that's my general advice.
Data science, artificial intelligence, machine learning, they've all become super popular over the past couple of years. So, as an undergrad at University of Michigan studying computer science, are those courses integrated into your curriculum or not because you're more like web development?
Right. So for me personally, I'm not interested in ML and AI and that type of stuff. But I have a lot of friends that are. My roommate he's going to go to grad school for ML, so he's been on that track more so. But the cool thing about Michigan, right, is that you can choose what you want to learn. I knew that I didn't really want to learn machine learning because I'm not a huge fan of stats, and machine learning is just like hard stats, to put it very, very generalized. Um, I knew I didn't want to do ML. But in terms of AI and ML at Michigan, there's a lot of offerings. There are a bunch of, 400 level like technical courses that will introduce you to ML and AI. And then if you want to go on, there's opportunities in grad school in terms of grad classes, but also I've had friends that are just volunteering to do research with a certain professor, just working on a project that involves ML, in some way. So like that's the cool thing about Michigan is, right, because the fact that we're like the number one public research university in the country means that if you're interested in something, like if you're interested in ML, for instance, and you want to do more work in the field, you can just reach out to a professor and they're probably doing some sort of research project and they're probably okay with you joining their team and helping out, right? It's almost that easy, as easy as like emailing a professor, which is super cool, right? So if you want to just get more experience, with AI, ML, that stuff, lots of opportunities to do so, definitely.
So I think we're gonna wrap up there for
Mhm.
today. Thank you everyone for joining today. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel and come back on January 7th for our show with Haley Dalzell. She's an embedded software engineer at GM, and she graduated from Troy High in 2010 and from Carnegie Mellon University with a bachelor's and master's in electrical and computer engineering. Thank you so much for watching, and we will catch you in 2 weeks.